Hi.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining. If you are here, we are so happy to have you. Second, if you want, put in the chat where you are coming in from and what company, what role, what do you have drinking, what are you eating, or what do you have going on?
A few minutes till everybody kind of rolls in. Yeah.
Oh, some from Texas,
Yeah.
India. Ashley, I
Yeah.
saw you, Indiana. Ashley, nice to see you.
So, Montreal, lots of snow.
Yeah, lots of snow out there. Oh, Joe, you're so good attending part of Keating. Give that performance review 5 stars. No.
5 stars.
You're still kind of joining in, Cassie. I think we'll give it another minute.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining in. I know for some of you it's early, some of you it's mid morning, some of you it's late, and we really appreciate it. And we know you're going to be in for us. Really excited. Again, if you're just joining us, please go ahead and put where you're from, where you're calling in from. If you want to put your company or where your location, you want to tell us what your weather is. Oh, look at that. South
Angola.
Carolina.
Wow.
Nice to
Angola.
see you.
Wow.
Wow, Angola. Oh, it's a chilly, sunny day there, Wilson. Oh, it's Kelly. Kelly Wilson. Nice. St. Louis, Missouri is 8 degrees.
Degrees this morning.
Yeah. Oh, Netherlands. Oh, you have a lot of rain. Oh no.
All right, Cassie, let's
All
go.
right.
All right, let's get started. Well, thank you everyone for joining us here on the Learning Buzz. I am Cassie, one of your co-hosts, and
I am Vishak, another one of your cohorts, and we're really happy to have you here in this new year. Happy New Year to everybody, guys. Um, Cassie, well, I guess it's almost like one of the project managers recently was telling me that it's about 4% into the year, so I don't think we can actually call it Happy New Year. But
yeah,
still, I mean, we're really happy to have you here.
yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and we're super excited for today's session. And we have Dr. Keith Keating joining us. And rather than us do a traditional like blurb about him and go on and on, because I know how great he is, you all know how great he is because you all showed up. Rather than doing that, let's just have him share his own story. And Keith, we'd love to hear what problems you are trying to solve for the professions with your book, The Trusted Learning Advisor and Hidden Value.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm not a big fan of those formal bio reads, so I appreciate letting me just kind of give some verbal vomit for a minute or two about my story. So I've been in our profession for about, gosh, 25 years, a really long time. I started when I was 5 years old, if you're doing the math. My father was in the military, grew up all over the world, started in Germany, Korea, Japan, and then eventually made my way to the US. When I did come to the US, I realized that my education system was significantly different than my peers. For example, outside of the US, you don't learn about US history because US history is just a blip in the grand scheme of things. So I was significantly behind there. I was ahead in some other places. And as a result, some teachers would tell my parents that I'm above average, and then other teachers would say I have a learning disability and I need to be held back. And so my journey starts with my struggles in school in those formative years, which eventually led to me being a high school dropout. I finished maybe 2 months of 10th grade, and for years, high school dropout, it wasn't just part of my story, it was my complete story. And it was the beginning and the end of how I saw myself. And my teachers told me I would never amount to anything. My father, you're destined to a life of fast food. First of all, there's nothing wrong with working in fast food, but I let them define me and who I was. And so today now, being a high school dropout is still the beginning of my story, but it's no longer the end of it. And so as a result of that, my view on learning is deeply personal because for a long time, I didn't believe that I was capable of learning. Because I struggled in school, I was told that I wasn't smart enough and that I wasn't cut out for traditional education. And it wasn't until adulthood or early adulthood, I guess, that I realized the problem wasn't me. The problem was in how I was being taught. And when that moment happened and I learned how to learn, everything changed for me. And it was like someone had handed me the keys to my own future. And learning stopped being something that made me feel broken, but rather something that made me feel really powerful. And I lucked into this career when I was 17. I had gone to a fast food restaurant and then knew that I wanted to be something else and found the job in the newspaper to be a trainer. I had no idea how to do it. I was terrible at it, but it set me on this path. And 25 years later, I'm still doing this. And so the second part of your question was about my babies or my books and the problem that I was trying to solve. And I guess I would answer the reason that I wrote the books is because I care. I care deeply about this profession. I care about the people who are doing the work, the learning teams who are often overlooked or undervalued. I care because I've been one of them for a long time, and I know what it feels like to work so hard at what we do and still feel invisible. And I care about the learners. I care about the people inside our organizations who are trying to do their jobs better, trying to grow, to adapt, to survive all of this constant change and to build a future for themselves and their families. And I care that learning isn't just professional for most of us, it's personal and it's life-changing when it's done right. And I ultimately care about the industry. I want to make sure that we don't fade into irrelevance. And I want to help us evolve and help us get better because the work that we do matters. It matters for people, it matters for organizations. So that's why I wrote these books. Because I care, and I think that we're so full of smart, committed people in our industry who want to do the right thing, but don't necessarily have the skills yet, or don't have the right language and don't have the right tools or the right frameworks. And so that's the tension that I was trying to solve, at least with the first book. So The Trusted Learning Advisor, it's not about learning design, it's a book about how we show up, how we move from being responsive to being responsible, how we build credibility without relying on our job titles, and how we learn the business, how we earn the right to challenge our stakeholders and become that kind of partner that our leaders call before they decide what solution that they want, not after they're already in trouble. So that was the first one. Once that came out and I started to think about, well, what else? What would be next after this? Then for me, a second problem showed up, and it's not a new problem at all. It's once we start to get on that path to being trusted learning advisors, And that's about our relationship. It's about our credibility, but our impact is still often invisible. And the value that we have is real, but it's not legible to the people who control the resources and the money. And so the business can sometimes feel the benefit, but we can't always articulate to that point of evidence that holds up in the budget meetings or holds up when we're trying to have others understand our value. And so if you can't make value visible, then you end up just defending your existence over and over and over again. And that's where the book Hidden Value came in. The book is all about value creation. It's about measuring that respects context. And it's about telling the story of what we do through enough evidence and enough clarity through the lens of the business, not through our own lens. It's not trying to prove that we're busy, but that we're building capability and we're building readiness. So in summary, what I'm sharing today and what I'm talking about and what's in the books isn't theory. It's what I've learned over the past 25 years inside organizations, inside the messy middle of trying to make learning matter. So if there's one promise that I'll make to you all for joining today, it's that I'm not here to give you motivational quotes, but I'm here to share with you a point of view and hopefully a set of actions that you can take on Monday or tomorrow, Friday, if you want to work Fridays, and make them more credible and start to apply them to help you be more proactive and to be more valuable in your organization. So Cassie, that was a long-winded monologue. I apologize. I have a lot I want to get out. This is my therapy.
Hmm.
I love it. I love it. And everyone in the comments also loved it. Lots of hearts, lots of comments out there, like about how we internalize as children, a lot of the things about your quote about more move from being responsive to responsible. People
Mhm.
love that.
Yeah.
And so going into 2026, as we look forward and reward a different kind of learning practitioner, this was on your post recently, what's different about this year?
That was just clickbait to get people here, and it worked. I'm just kidding, sort of. I don't actually think that 2026 is special. It's no more special than any other year. I mean, if you've been in this industry long enough, we've been declaring that this is the year everything changes every year. 20 years ago, it was MOOCs, if you even remember what a MOOC is, or you were around for that. Then about 15 years ago, it was mobile learning. Mobile learning, this is the year that everything changes. Everything's going to be mobile learning. And then 10 years ago, VR, AR. It was going to revolutionize everything that we do. All of us are going to have VR headsets. To start with Google Cardboard Box, and then it was Oculus. We see how that turned out. And then now, this year, it's the thing that I promised I wasn't going to mention out loud today. So I'm not even going to mention the two letters. So technology changes, the headlines change, the anxiety level changes, but the underlying challenge for our profession doesn't change. So when I say 2026 is going to reward a different kind of L&D practitioner, I don't mean that it's somebody who has the newest tools or reacts to the loudest trend. What I mean by that is it's someone who is going to be rewarded for looking inward, inward in themselves as practitioners and inward in your own organizations, your context. And I want to be clear about this word context. And I love that it's starting to pop up more and more on social media. I think the word gets used a little bit loosely. When I say your context, I mean one thing. It's your organization. That is the only thing that matters. Your company, your firm, your business, that is your universe. That is the only thing that matters. Not the industry as a whole, not LinkedIn, not conference case studies, not those Instagram moments. not what worked at Google or Amazon or whoever is in the spotlight this week. Your universe is the only lens that matters for you. It doesn't matter what Keith says. It doesn't matter what Josh Bersin says, because what worked for me at General Motors didn't work at Archwell. What worked at HSBC could not have worked at McKinsey. What's working now at BDO and everything that's winning at BDO for me, for our team, could never and did never happen at any other firm that I worked for. And it couldn't, because every organization has its own culture, has its own constraints, has its own level of maturity, its own appetite for risk, and its own business reality. And those are the only things that shape what is possible for your success, what is appropriate, what will actually stick. And this is where I think a lot of us get ourselves in trouble. We love best practices. I love them. It's something lights up in my brain when I hear someone say, "Oh, I have a best practice," or you're reading a case study, or you go to these conferences and someone shares their beautiful Instagram moment of their project, and you're like, "Yes, that's it. That's the holy grail. That's the silver bullet. That's the answer that I've been looking for because it worked for them." But most best practices fail, and not because they're bad ideas. They're really good ideas, but because they were copied. They were lifted and shifted from one person in one universe that worked and dropped in a completely different universe. And that's not strategy, that's hope. And we see these polished success stories, we see these slides, we forget that what we're seeing is the outcome, not the environment that made it all possible. We don't see the culture. We don't see the constraints. We don't see the trade-offs. We don't see what didn't work. And transparently, at BDO, we are winning. But is it as a result of me and my team? We're an ingredient in that. But we're winning because of the construct of the universe, because the firm was ready for us, because we have support from the CEO all the way down, because all of these aspects were put into place that help us be successful, not because of a specific job title, a degree, a book that we read.
Hmm.
The recipe for success has very little to do with us. It has to do with our universe as a whole. And I've never experienced this level of success from L&D before. And again, it's not me. It's because I'm in the right place at the right time with all of these constraints and these characteristics that are allowing us to be successful. And so when you hear things, when you read things, when you're listening to people, you have to filter it through one question. Does this work in my universe, in my organization? Not, is this cool? Is this what everybody is doing? But rather, given my culture that I'm in, the risk tolerance, the maturity of my C-suite, of my stakeholders, of my learners, of my own L&D team, and our business priorities. Does this make sense here for us and now? Because two L&D teams, you can do the exact same thing. And one can be successful and praised as innovative, and the other can be criticized and be thought of as an order taker and be reactive and not successful. And the difference isn't the idea. The difference is the context of your organization. And for me, that's why 2026 isn't, again, the year's no different, but right now the focus isn't about more tools or more content. It's about our own judgment. And the judgment is knowing your universe well enough to say with confidence, no, this isn't going to work for us. That sounds great. And I love what they're doing with it, but we're not ready for that now. I get calls from vendors all the time, and there's all these cool, shiny tools that are out there. And my team will bring some to me and ask, hey, what about this? And we'll have conversations about whether or not we're ready for it. And as much as we're winning, we're not mature at all. We don't have the cool, fancy new tools. We're focusing on the basics and getting the fundamentals right before we can start to add on to that. And before we talk about trends or tools or tactics, I think the real work is just understanding the constraints of your universe. Because constraints, we think about them as limitations, but really constraints, if you flip it, they define what's possible for us. And so we have to be aware of those constraints. And once you see your organization clearly, then you stop chasing these other best practices and these universal truths about L&D. And I'm sorry, I just don't believe that we can identify universal truths because there is no universal truth, except that you have to define your truths based on your own organization, your own context, and then you can start making the right decisions. And so I'd
So
love to hear from a few of you in the chat. If you think about your organization right now, what constraint most shapes your learning decisions? Like, is it risk appetite? Is it budget? Is it culture? Is it regulations? Regulations can put constraints on what we can and can't do. Is it trust? What are some constraints that you have that's shaping your learning decisions right now? And Cassie, you've just joined a new organization. I know you're about a couple weeks in now, but I'm just curious for you, like what's a constraint that you've seen pop up that you know you have to take into context as you start to build solutions?
I think definitely to answer your question, it's culture. Because to your point, understanding the pace of the organization, the perspectives, and me being patient has a lot to do with how I transition and roll into this organization. And a lot of people also in the chat, they also say, it's culture, it's leadership. Some other people are in the chat are also putting that it's constraints of information guardrails. Like that was a good
Mm,
one. I was like, oh, I didn't think about that. That's true. And sometimes it's we see budget here. People are putting budget, and so for me, coming into a new organization, they've never had an L&D team. And so I have to really practice that pace and patience with everyone and then learn the perspectives and get a feel of like where they've been, where they want to go, and then how do I align to that.
pace is an important constraint. I would say pace is something I have to think about too at BDO and think about the maturity of where we are versus where I want to be able to go towards. And I know as I reflect on last year, I know I pushed my team really hard. And I'm thinking this year, I've talked to my leaders about how do we maybe take our foot off the accelerator just a little bit because pace can be a constraint and time. I know for us, time is a huge constraint for our learners. I would love for them to be in learning 24 hours a day, but somebody just said the 30-second learning culture. Uh, we still get the request of, well, what can you do in 30 minutes? What can we do in
Yeah.
30 minutes? Nothing. Nothing. I mean, we can build some foundation, we can maybe plant a few seeds, but we're not a car wash. You can't just send people to us that are dirty and then we're going to make them clean in 30 minutes and boom, their behavior has changed. There's lots of constraints. So I love that you have taken a moment, reflect on that, continue reflecting on the constraints in your context, your universe, because that's an important starting point for awareness on where and how you're going to be able to be successful.
Keith, actually, I had another constraint also that comes up to me sometimes from clients is you mentioned the shiny new tools that are coming up, right? A lot of clients say, like, what can we do with the new tools? I mean, try out this authoring tool or that one, and how fast can we cut down on this? But again, like what you just said right now, it makes me reflect, it's more about going back to the fundamentals. It's not about the tools, right?
What
So
problem are you trying to solve?
yeah, yeah. What problem are we trying to solve? That actually leads me to the next question. You keep mentioning that, we have a lot of thought leaders around, and we hear a lot of that when we get into LinkedIn and various other places. But you keep mentioning that we need more practitioners and fewer thought leaders. Uh, Wanted to know more about that.
I think I upset a few people recently when I had posted a video on this topic, which was not my goal. So I'm just sharing my perspective on thought leader versus practitioner because I believe that the two roles are often conflated. And so, in my opinion, thought leaders tend to talk about what should happen, what could happen, what might happen, or what has happened in the past. Whereas practitioners are accountable for what actually does happen. Practitioner to me is somebody who's actually doing the work. So a thought leader can shape ideas, but a practitioner carries responsibility. And in our profession, I feel like we're over-indexed on ideas. We're over-indexed and we're under-invested in the actual practice of doing the work. And being an L&D practitioner means that your work has consequences. If the learning doesn't land, if capability doesn't change, if the business doesn't get better, you don't get to hide from that. The work shows up in our results. And that's the lens that I'm coming from when I talk about practitioner versus thought leader. Our profession does not have an ideas problem. We have plenty of ideas. Go to LinkedIn and you're going to see ad nauseum all of these ideas, but we have an application problem. What I mean by that is being an L&D practitioner demands that you are grounded in the reality of your business, not just fluent in the language of the learning industry. Practitioners learn the business, the work, the pressure, the constraints, the trade-offs that leaders are actually making. Practitioners have to behave like anthropologists. We observe before we prescribe. We listen before we design. We study how the work actually happens, not how it's supposed to happen. So in the Trusted Learning Advisor, I talk about this shift explicitly, moving from order taker to strategic business partner. And that doesn't happen just because you're smart or you're well-intentioned. It happens because you've earned that credibility by understanding the problem behind the request, that the the proximity, the proximity because practitioners sit closer to the work, closer to the mess. We don't just ask, what training do you want? We ask, what's breaking down? What's getting in the way? What's stopping you from being successful in your job? What happens if this doesn't change? And then we test. And we don't wait for perfect conditions. We experiment, we adjust, we fail, we improve in real time. Practice, to me, it lives in motion, not just in frameworks. And this is where I believe that staying 2 steps ahead of your stakeholder comes in play as we move from being reactive to proactive. And being ahead, it doesn't mean predicting the future. None of us can do that. Although I keep my magic 8 ball right here as a reminder in case I want to predict the future. Let's see. Try again later. Okay, there we go. It means anticipating needs before they show up as urgent requests. And that's why for us as a practitioner, research matters. Not just academic research, but organizational research. Talking to leaders, listening to frontline employees, looking for patterns across the different service lines, running qualitative check-ins or research. Design thinking is a great tool for this. Building learning communities where information flows in both directions. And in Hidden Value, I describe this as being a value seeker before you become a value creator, because you can't create value that you haven't first learned how to recognize. For us, you can be visible online, you can be well-read, you can have strong opinions, but if those ideas aren't applied inside your organization, then credibility can erode. And being an L&D practitioner demands curiosity, proximity, judgment, curiosity to understand the business, the learners, proximity to stay grounded in the reality of what's actually happening, and then judgment to decide, can this work in my context and this universe? And all of that is so much harder than just posting an opinion or regurgitating what somebody else has said. All of that, that's the actual work that makes you a practitioner. Cassie, I'm curious for you, how do you try to stay 2 steps ahead of your stakeholders?
I probably want to say it comes down to relationships with others across the organization, making sure that I have conversations with folks at all levels. So that way I can get a pulse of the organization. And then when I do engage with a stakeholder, I'll say, hey, that's interesting you brought that up. I just talked to so and so who works on the front line and they said this. And so now it makes it relevant and validates for the stakeholder. The stakeholder now feels they have more trust in me.
Voice of the learner, voice of the business cannot be underestimated. Like I said, can be, but it shouldn't be. It is so much more powerful than anything we ever have to say. When you can bring in their real world perspective, when you can bring in those frontline workers and the voice of them, that helps us gain insight as to what's actually happening out in the business. And then we can repackage that and share that with the stakeholders. Because oftentimes, at least in my experience, my direct stakeholders are 4, 5, 6 degrees separated from the actual work. So if you want to stay 2 steps ahead of them, be grounded in the business, do the research, package it up, and bring that information back to your stakeholders.
Yeah, and Keith, a lot of the audience here, they're saying the same thing in the chat, knowing and understanding the pain points, really understanding the business objectives, networking, relationship building is key. And I use the word trust. And so in your work, you draw a sharp line between titles and trust. So how does someone in LD actually earn credibility with stakeholders?
Trust is not built because of someone's title. And anyone can make up a fancy title on LinkedIn. And many do. I'll leave that there. I have the titles, I have the degrees, I wrote the damn books, but I still have to work constantly at building and earning that credibility. And trust is not something that we can just claim. It's something that other people decide that they're going to give to you based on how you show up. For me, it falls down to 5 components: credibility, your reliability, your intimacy, your relationships with others, like you just talked about, Cassie, communication, and your overall intent. I would say personally, I think credibility is the bedrock or the foundation for trust. And to me, earning credibility means that you've done the work in your craft. There are two questions that I encourage everyone to think about as it comes to credibility. And I'm thinking about these on a reoccurring basis. At least twice a year, I take a step back. These are the two questions. Number one, what have I done to earn my credibility? Earn, because it is earned. And the second question is, why should anybody listen to me? That means if you've earned your credibility, you have rooted what you do based on research, based on learning science. And if you have not read Make It Stick, The Science of Successful Learning, this is a must read. I have no association with the book. I get no kickbacks, but it is the foundation for everything that we do and should be doing, rooting our work in science. You understand how adult learners learn, understand behavior change, understand transfer, reinforcement, application, elaboration, generation, learning transfer. To be able to explain the why behind what you're recommending and what it's rooted in, not just the what you're recommending. To build credibility, it means that you are deeply clear on who you are solving problems for. And credibility for us, at least in my experience, it grows when your stakeholders feel seen, when they feel understood, when they believe that you grasp their reality, not just the learning solution that you want to deploy. I'll give you a personal example, and this could be, I don't know, a little bit controversial. How many times do you start thinking about your next year priorities, your next year agenda in, let's say, September? Because usually, in my experience, September rolls around, it's like, okay, we got to be thinking about our next year priorities. And so what do? We get together as a team and we start thinking about what we want to do, what we need to accomplish. And we put together our priorities. It wasn't until about 5 years ago that I finally realized, wait a minute. When we do that, we are thinking about us in a silo. When do our stakeholders, when do our business, when does our organization create the firm priorities, the business priorities, the stakeholder priorities? For us, that doesn't happen until about December. So my people leader came to me in November and said, what are your priorities for next year? And I said, what are the firm priorities for next year? Well, we're still working on those. Great. I cannot share with you mine until you share with me the entire firm objectives, because that's how we're going to align our priorities. So credibility starts when we align what we want to do with what the firm, what the organization actually needs us to do. So credibility is built in how you listen. When we stop being practitioners, that's when credibility can start to erode. And I've seen this happen. When you move away from the work, away from the business, away from solving the real problems, it becomes more abstract. So to go back to your original question, for me, stakeholders don't trust titles. I know firsthand. They trust people who understand their pain. And that's why the proximity to the business matters so much. It cannot be overstated. You can't earn credibility from a distance. You have to be close enough to feel it all. And practically speaking, have a point of view. Ground it in research, both internal research and external research. So internal research, talked about that. External research, World Economic Forum, McKinsey Global Institute, all these reports that are coming out about trends and all that other stuff, your LinkedIn network, this network here, grounded in research, run qualitative research inside your organization. And for me, ultimately, stop trying to sit at someone else's table. Stop trying to get a seat at somebody else's table. Stop trying to get into that room where you think those decisions are made, where you think, if I could just get there, then I could drive value. I could have a voice. I could have impact. I spent years trying to get a seat at somebody else's table. And I thought, if I get that next job title, as soon as I become senior manager, I'm going to make a difference. Got there, didn't work. Okay, as soon as I become director, people are going to listen. I'm going to have that seat. Nope, got there, didn't work. Okay, as soon as I get to VP or finally chief learning officer, now I'm going to have a seat at the table and people are going to listen. No, got into that room, nothing changed. Somebody else still decided if I could speak, how long I could speak, what topic I could speak on. And so for us to build our credibility, I encourage you to stop trying to sit at somebody else's table and instead build your own table and invite them to come and sit with you. And that starts with the point of view, with the research, packaging up that research in a meaningful manner, and then inviting them to come and learn from you insights on their own business. Keep asking yourself these two questions. What have I done to earn my credibility? And why should anybody listen to me today? And so I'd love to ask you all a quick question. One word. If I were to interview your stakeholders today, what is the one word they would use to describe you?
Oh, this is
What do
interesting.
you think that one word would be? I know, Cassie, you just started your new role, so you haven't built up a lot of coins in the bank account yet for relationships, but what do you think the one word might be at this point?
So far, the feedback I got was that I'm listening.
Listen. Excellent. I'm just taking a look at the chat. Passionate, valued, listener, cares, open, trust. I'm really impressed. I didn't think that the one word description would be all positive. For example, at GM, our stakeholders for years just said order taker, order taker. Not innovative. That's two words. I asked for one word. It took us about 4 years to be able to change that narrative for how they saw us. I think at BDO, if I were to use one word, the word tiring popped into head. We're tiring because we're constantly asking for their time. They see the value in what we do, but they're stretched really thin. Now we see the real words. Annoying, unrealistic. Love that, Nicole. I think in some ways we could be considered unrealistic as well, which we're trying to take that into consideration. I had someone come to me the other day and say, hey, we have this new idea for a 3-hour instructor-led training we want the entire firm to go through. And my question back to them was, tell me why you think your priority is the priority that everyone should have to go through. Because I can give you a list of 50 other leaders who think their priority is the priority that everyone needs to go to. Relentless. Love that. Relentless. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like relentless.
Okay.
Negotiating. Sorry, Cassie.
I had a question for you.
Yes.
This is regarding, I mean, it's so great you mentioned about those two questions and such, but as a practitioner, right? I mean, you keep saying, I've heard you say this, that never get bored with the basics, and let's go back to the basics. I mean, what does that mean for me as a practitioner? I mean, can you let me know a little more about that?
Love this question. When I say go back to the basics, it's based on never get bored with the basics. And I'm borrowing this from Kobe Bryant. Kobe wasn't obsessed with the flashy moves. He was obsessed with mastery. And he practiced these fundamentals relentlessly, like his footwork, his balance, the shot mechanics over and over and over again. And it wasn't because he lacked talent. We all know he didn't lack talent. It was because he understood something that most people overlook. The basics are not boring. They're powerful. And in our profession, we love to chase what's new. new tools, new platforms, new frameworks. And I get it. The novelty there feels like progress. It feels like, again, this new holy grail, the thing is going to get us where we need to go. But the truth is, most of our impact problems are not innovation problems. They're fundamentals problems. And what I mean by that is that many people in our field, they skip the basics, or they're assuming they've already mastered them. And I'm speaking firsthand. I will raise my hand to say I did a lot of damage for a lot of years because I had no fundamentals. I thought the LMS was learning. I remember for years, because it was just when the LMS first came out, I was like, yeah, you just throw it on the LMS and that's how people learn. There was no science behind it. There was no true design behind what I was doing because no one had ever taught me. I had never heard of learning science, of neuroscience. How revolutionary to design for the brain. It's like, well, what do you mean? No, 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 we're not designing for the brain. We're just putting content up there. So now I'm trying to undo a lot of the damage that I've done. And I think that many people skip these basics because our industry is very welcoming. Anyone can say, I'm in learning and development. There's no specific degree you have to have. There's no specific certification. I see a lot of people, if you just look in their LinkedIn profile and you kind of go back their history, you see, okay, you were in this industry, and then poof, all of a sudden overnight, you're now in L&D. We do a disservice to our industry, to our stakeholders, to our learners when we don't put in the work to get the foundations right, to get the basics right. So to me, the basics in our work starts with researching and knowing your audience, knowing your context, your culture, your universe, the real understanding, what success looks like in their world, what gets rewarded, what gets punished, what you can't design relevant learning if you don't understand the reality in which people are operating in. The second fundamental foundation is diagnosing the real problem, not the requested problem, not the requested solution, because often it's the requested solution that's coming forth. If you think about the life cycle of an order taker, somebody else identified the problem, somebody else identified the solution, they came and told you what to do, and then you did it. That's the life cycle of an order taker. And so for us, it's diagnosing that real problem, that root cause, not just the symptom that they're bringing to us. The next area is consulting instead of order taking. Reactive L&D, wait for work, they're constantly firefighting, but proactive allows us to shape it. It means bringing insight, bringing options, bringing research, bringing trade-offs, not just accepting whatever happens in lands in your inbox. And then designing with clear intent. For every learning experience, it should be, what are people going to do differently as a result of this? Or how will we know that they're doing things differently? Not, did they attend? Did they complete? I still get asked, even today, executive team seems to really only care about how many people attended. And I'm still floored, but that's okay. We're working through it. It's progress. Uh, and then, of course, lastly, it's measuring what actually works, which is not easy for us. It's not measuring everything meaningful. It's not the completion rates and the NPS scores, which I am not a fan of NPS scores at all. I have people on my team who will say, oh, we got a 100% NPS score. What? Really? Really? I don't think so. We're not asking the right questions then. Anyway, the basics are alignment, evidence, clarity. Advanced tools don't fix this poor diagnosis. If we can't do the basics well, then no advanced solution is going to save us. And when the fundamentals are strong, everything else becomes more powerful. And so that's when I say never get bored with the basics. It's not because they're easy. It's because that's what actually makes us effective. And so many people don't have it right, and they end up doing more damage and perpetuate this cycle that we don't have any value. We don't have any value because they don't have the fundamentals right to be able to set themselves up for value. That's my long-winded answer. So I'm just
Well,
curious. Go ahead.
go ahead, continue.
I was going to say, for everybody here, I want to ask you a question, one word response. What do you personally spend more time doing right now? Do you find that you're responding to requests, reactive, or are you diagnosing real problems, proactive? Are you feeling more reactive or more proactive? And again, sometimes this has nothing to do with us. It has to do with the environment that we're in and where we are on that maturity scale. So Cassie, for you, as being someone new, are you finding right now you feel like you're going to be pulled more in the proactive or the reactive?
Both. And I think because there was not an L&D here, they're trying to solve, address challenges that they've had existing and continuing to try to fix it, is what I want to say, when actually that's not the right choice. We need to find out what the root cause is first before we can move forward. And many of the people here in the chat that are either saying, they're either proactive, responding, reactive, a mix of both. And again, it just depends on the organization. You said culture has a lot to do with it. And I think that's where it
Also
stems.
can depend on your stakeholder. You can be in the same organization, same culture, different stakeholders. I would say for us, it's both. There is a proactive aspect, and then there's also reactive. Be a
Yeah.
hard
And the
balance.
other thing is like, you've mentioned you've been in the industry for 20 years, and that's a lot of years. So you started when you were like 5, and then
Yeah.
4 years later you got it. No, I'm just kidding. So what keeps you in this profession? I know for me, like what I enjoy. I'm curious, what about you? Everyone has their why.
Before I answer that, I just want to do a quick pulse check with everybody here. Anyone feeling a little bit heavy this year right now, maybe even burnt out with what's happening or what it feels like might be happening in our industry? See some yeses. 2 weeks in, already feeling burnt out. Oh, okay. So here's my hopeful motivation to you. I'm going to start by saying that the work that we do is hard. We are asked to change human behavior in complex systems while operating under constraints that we don't control. We have no control over. And then on top of that, we're expected to measure and prove impact that shows up over time across people in ways that don't fit neatly into metrics or dashboards. And that's just to name a few of the challenges that we have. There are heavy seasons in this profession, but there have always been, at least since I've been here. And I believe that there always will be. And I would be doing you a disservice if I wasn't completely blunt. And if you're looking for a career where things eventually get easy, I don't believe this is it. And that's why knowing your why you do this is not optional. It's absolutely essential. And so for me, my why starts with my journey that shaped everything I believe about learning and development. When you've been the person who was counted out, who's been overlooked, who's been underestimated, it changes how you see other people. You start to notice these invisible barriers that others are facing. And then you start to ask questions differently. Who are we missing in the workforce? Who isn't being developed? Who isn't being thought of when we are designing these learning experiences? And so for me, I'm constantly rooting for that underdog because I am one. I know firsthand what it feels like when learning can unlock someone and they're finally given a chance. For me to be able to go from high school dropout to doctorate plus other degrees at an Ivy League university, learning changed the trajectory of my life. It gave me confidence. It gave me options. It gave me a future that I did not think could have ever been possible. And that's why I believe deeply in the work that we do. It's why I push so hard for learning to be seen not as a cost center, not as a perk, but as a business critical, life changing engine for growth and opportunity. And when I think about our why on a bigger scale, it's this. Change is happening faster than ever. Change is the new normal. It's happening exponentially, blah, blah, blah. All those things that are all true. Learning is the skill for today and for tomorrow. But with that grandiose idea, let me be clear that I believe we're going to always be fighting an uphill battle. This profession is a lot like being a doctor, a nurse, a dentist, a technician of any sort. They don't wake up hoping that there are no problems to solve that day. They don't expect patients to arrive without opinions or without self-diagnosis. That is the job. How many of us have used WebMD and thought we knew better than our doctor? And we go and we tell them, here's all the symptoms, here's what I need. People are always going to think they can do our job. They will always bring us diagnoses. They will always bring us opinions about learning, opinions about what we should do. And it's not something for us to resent. It's something for us to simply accept. Our responsibility is to demonstrate why we know best. Because we put in the work, because we understand the science, because we understand the business, because we understand what being credible means. And when the going gets tough, because it does get tough, even after all these things taken into account, your stakeholders can still tell you you're wrong, still tell you to take that order. That's part of the job. For me, there are 3 words that I focus on for my why, and I keep them right here on a Post-it note next to my laptop for the moments where the going gets tough. Learning changes lives. Learning unlocks human potential. And that's what we do, regardless of your job title, regardless of how long you've been feeling that struggle, or whether or not everybody recognizes this, because not everybody will immediately recognize this. Not everybody's going to thank us for it. But you wouldn't be here without learning. They wouldn't be where they are without learning. And that's what we do. Learning saved my life. Learning how to learn gave me control over my future, and I want that for everybody. And so when the going gets tough, and it will, keep those 3 words in mind for you, or reflect today on your why. Why are you here? Why are you doing this? Why do you want to continue to fight that good fight? Because for us, our industry is going to continue to evolve. I have a crystal ball here. I have a future ball here. Let's see, what's going to happen to our industry? Please try again later. Okay, we'll try again later. So from my perspective, I don't think that L&D survives with the same name. And not because I believe the work is irrelevant, but because I think how we define ourselves has to evolve. I don't really call myself L&D anymore. If you met me on the street and you asked me what I do, I would say to you, I'm a problem solver.
Mm.
I'm a connector. Sometimes the answer is learning, sometimes it's a design, sometimes it's being a therapist, sometimes it's clarity, it's culture. It can be all of these things. Sometimes I would tell you about half of what I do as a CLO has nothing to do with learning and development. It has to do with looking for gaps in the business, looking for problems and trying to help solve those problems, or to connect people to solve those problems. A lot of it has nothing to do with learning development. The three most dangerous words in any organization is not my job. And so we have to get out of our own way as our industry continues to evolve and not pigeonhole ourselves, not put us in this box of, I'm just learning and development. I'm just an instructional designer. I'm just a project manager. I'm just a trainer. Because you have a lot more skills than that. And the organization needs to see that. Our industry needs to evolve. Having that mindset of how can I help is going to be what helps us thrive today, tomorrow, and it could be what also helps you lead to your own why. And so as long as organizations have problems to solve, as long as people have potential to unlock, then our work, whatever our work is called, will always matter. So I know that it's heavy right now, but spend a little bit of time thinking about your why, and please feel free to borrow mine. Learning changes lives on your journey. Thank
Very
you all so
popular.
much for joining today. I know it's 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
Thank you so much, Keith, for joining us, and very powerful words, a lot of insights that we'll be carrying forward, and hopefully as in through 2026. Um, Wanted to check with the rest of the audience over here also, if you want to drop in the chat. Uh, what
There are
would
some
you be able to?
giveaways.
Yeah, yeah, even
Yeah,
gift
we're
giveaways also.
running a little short on time on the giveaways, but what we'd like to do is we will post on LinkedIn who
Yeah.
are the winners of the giveaway. So that way we can honor everyone's time here. Because we want to make sure that everyone has great things that they're doing in their organization for learning.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Cassie. Thank you so much, Keith. Thanks everybody for
Have a
joining
Thank
great
you,
us.
day.
Have
Keith.
a great
Thanks,
year ahead.
everyone. Go
Bye.
out, change lives.
Yes.